Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, how would you like to kill Radahn before he can even start any of his legendary 70-hit combos? How would you like to do so much damage so quickly that he can barely even let his hair down before he's in phase 2, and before he can even swing his sword more than once in that phase, he'll already be dead. That quick, that simple. This is Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. This was arguably the single most powerful boss-killing build in the entire base game of Elden Ring. The sheer number of ways to stack damage buffs for this spell is incredible, and while the spread or positioning isn't exactly completely reliable, there's definitely some RNG involved. You can pretty regularly hit 2 or more bolts per cast on a target, and with each bolt doing close to 10,000 damage, that adds up extremely quickly, to the point that any larger enemy tends to turn to paste in a matter of moments, and all it takes is 2 or 3 good casts at maximum to kill any boss in the game, and one of the casts that I did on Radahn was not even charged. It was just a mini one to use the opening. Add on top of that everything used to buff this spell also applies to the majority of other lightning incantations in the game, so you have a bit of roundness to apply to non-boss situations too. And suddenly you can see one of the highest damage potential setups coming together very quickly and easily. So with all that said, let's dive into what you need to put together to actually have this full setup for yourself, as well as where to find it and pick it up, with the caveat that I will be assuming you already have all the parts from the base game of Elden Ring, and then we'll go over your stats and attribute points, and then finally just a bit into how to actually play and the full long buff cycle of the build. First, let's start with your actual weapons, and that is where the true complexity of this will start to show itself, because the way that we achieve such ridiculously high damage is with an exceptionally long buff cycle before every encounter to enable the playstyle to obliterate bosses. First things first, you want a Gravelstone seal. Ideally, you would have a second one in your offhand as well. These buff Ancient Dragon Cult type incantations by 15%, and while you only get the incant scaling from the seal that you cast with, you do still get the bonus effect of the one in your offhand as well, and 2 of these same bonuses stacked together multiplicatively. If you don't have someone willing to drop you a second one of them or aren't doing New Game Plus, you can always just use an Erdtree seal to cast while having the Gravel seal in your other hand for the bonus applied on top of it, which is less damage but not hugely so. Past that, then we have your secondary left-hand slot, and the slots that I have everything in are very specific, so I'll show you the layout quite purposefully. Second left-hand slot will be Madding Hand. This is specifically because it gives us a 7.5% boost to all damage that you do for 30 seconds after Madness is applied nearby. This weapon is dropped by the Madding Hand enemy NPC located right here on your map, who you encounter as you first enter the Abyssal Woods region. In your third left-hand slot, you want the Poisoned Hand fist weapon, and this is the exact equivalent of that previous one, but for poison, so another 7.5% buff if you or nearby enemy are inflicted with poison or rot with this weapon on one of your hands. This one comes from the northwest side of the Well Depth area within Ballarat Tower, located here. Then in your right-hand second slot, you want the Deadly Poison Perfume bottle. The unique skill of this weapon basically just fully applies deadly poison to you and anyone near you when it is activated. So we use this to activate our buffs by poisoning ourselves before a fight. This weapon is purchased from Tolier, earliest found at this specific site of grace in the opening area of the DLC. I'll get into the specifics of the buff cycle a bit later on in the video, but again, the specific slots we have these in are quite important. And your final slot in the right hand should be any 1.5 weight dagger, as the actual one doesn't matter. We're not using it for damage. You don't need to upgrade it. You just need to put the Endure Ash of War on it. This will let you cast the Ash as a head of an upcoming attack to create a larger opening, thus letting you cast our spell at full power in plenty of spaces that you otherwise would just get knocked out of it by the first attack that hit you. Moving on from that, then we have your armor, and you won't be wearing any because instead we are going to be using the Priestess Heart reusable tool, which you can pick up off of the floor at the Grand Ultra Dragon Communion in the Jagged Peak region once you have defeated Baal the Dread. If you use this item while you are naked, you enter Dragon Priestess form, and if you use it again while in this form, you will get a 20% boost to all Dragon Cult incantations that you cast for the next 60 seconds, so this is a pretty big one. Then for your talismans, we have the Godfrey Icon Talisman for a 15% boost to the damage of our charged spells, the Lightning Scorpion Charm for a 12% boost to all lightning damage that we deal at the cost of a bit of damage negation loss. Then we have the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation Talisman for a 20% boost to all damage you do for 20 seconds after a poison or rot happens nearby, and then the Aged One's Exaltation Talisman for a 20% boost to all damage that we deal for 30 seconds after a Madness proc happens nearby. So we use this in conjunction with the fist weapons that we have to get a massive boost for 30 seconds after a Madness, then 20 seconds after the poison, which of course overlap and stack multiplicative with each other to get just massive bonuses. To get the Aged One's Exaltation Talisman then, in the Abyssal Woods region, I'll just show you the full path to the specific enemy from the Ruined Church Site of Grace, which is in the southeast. But once you actually get here, what you need to specifically do is engage them, make them see you, which normally you wouldn't want them to, but then if you get a parry Specifically, if you parry their grab attack, this is what makes them actually vulnerable to damage so you can kill them. And if you kill this specific one, you will get the talisman when it dies. Moving on to our Wondrous Flask of Physic then, you of course want the Lightning Shrouding Cracked Tear for a 20% boost to lightning damage for 3 minutes after you drink it. And then situationally, you want the Bloodsucking Tear for an extra 20% bonus to all damage you do for 3 minutes at the cost of constant health drain. Some bosses are sort of scriptable in a way that lets you get 1 or 2 casts off during your buff windows before this will actually start to hurt you massively. Other bosses will just take enough time to actually give you a proper opening that this tier will become a negative. Basically, if it lets you confidently one-shot or two-shot a boss within your buff window, it is absolutely worth using. If it does not do that, you instead want something like the Opaline Hard tier just for some damage negation to help you power through the damage that you are trading with when you get off your spellcast with Endure. The Bloodsucking tier then comes from the Furnace Golem at the Castle Watering Hole Site of Grace, specifically the downed one that is in front of the runes that you can bring back to life by throwing hefty furnace pots into its head basket. Then when you actually kill it, you will get the tier dropped. Past that then we have our spells, and you want of course Golden Vow for a 15% boost to all damage done and 10% boost to damage negation for 80 seconds after casting. Then we are also using Blessing of the Erdtree as a healing buff for a solid bit of health regen at 12 health gained per second for 90 seconds after casting it, helping to counteract the loss from the Bloodsucking tier and, well, applying deadly poison to ourselves. Then we have Howl of Shabiri, which is a body buff for a 25% boost to all damage that we do for 40 seconds that also lowers all damage negation by 30%, which is usually quite dangerous to use, but again, our goal is to one-shot or get as close to that as possible, which makes this less of a risk overall because we're not going to be hit very many times to begin with. As well, casting this multiple times in a row gives you madness buildup and thus applies proper madness to you if you use it repeatedly, and that is how we trigger our madness buffs before a boss fight. Then we have, of course, Ancient Dragging Lightning Strike itself, charged incantation that we hold down to do all of our hefty damage really, and then you can run any other Dragon Cult incantations that you want for variety and adaptability purposes, as they are all lightning damage, which we buff significantly, and most of them are also chargeable, which buffs them even more, with a special shout out to the new Knight's Lightning Spear incantation, which is incredibly solid for things like the NPC fight in Enter Ellum, or smaller humanoid enemies all around the place that still need dispatching with speed, but are hard to hit with multiple bolts of Ancient Dragon Lightning. With that covered then, let's talk about your actual stats and attributes for the build, which is quite simple for this one. 60 Vigor so you don't get squashed, then straight up to 80 Faith for the Faith scaling soft cap. Then you can just split your remaining points between Mind and Endurance depending on if you'd rather have more stamina for rolling on repeat, or more FP to cast more spells between each flask use. Personally, I found 26 Mind to be right around the sweet spot for this setup in most situations. Then finally, let's get into the actual meat of what you need to know, which is how to actually play this build, and importantly, the full buff cycle that you need to go through before entering a boss room. We don't do any hot swapping of items, fully equipping or unequipping anything, we're just using the slots we have. This just comes from a very planned order of interactions. First up, cast Golden Vow, then cast Blessing of the Erdtree. Then you want to apply your dragon form and then use it a second time to activate the 60-second Dragon Cult buff. Then you will start using Howl of Shabiri with the Matting Hand in your left hand and your seal in your right hand. Keep using this until you run out of mana, which will be just not quite enough to actually proc madness usually, though the number of times that you actually have to cast this to apply madness to yourself seems to vary a little bit weirdly. Then you want to drink your FP flask and your Wondrous flask just before you actually proc the madness. Then once you do, one more Howl of Shabiri should proc it. Then swap your right hand and left hand weapon to the next slots, which will equip your poisoned hand in the left hand and your deadly poison perfume bottle in your right hand. Then you want to press the Ash of War button to apply deadly poison to yourself using the bottle. Swap both hands one time further, which will put you on the Endure dagger in your right hand and the seal on your left hand. Drink a mana flask, drink a health flask to put you right back around full, then enter the boss room. Once you're inside, you want to use Endure at the earliest moment that it will still apply to the opening attack from the boss. Swap instantly to your right hand to the next slot, which is your second seal, so that you have both equipped at the same time. Then cast Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike with either hand, it doesn't really matter which, and of course, hold it to charge. This opening salvo will do just under 10,000 damage per bolt that hits the enemy depending on their personal damage negations, and then past that, it's just about using the Endure dagger to find openings if the enemy somehow lives through that. With a note that I should make, the uncharged version of this spell is actually still incredibly potent if you have just a small opening, not a big enough one to charge it properly, and as well I feel the need to reiterate that there is definitely some RNG with this spell. You can basically script a boss fight by learning how to move and where that makes the boss go, what moves that makes them use, things like that, but at the end of the day, the number of lightning bolts that will hit a boss on each cast of this spell will vary, even if they seem to be in the exact same place each time, and so it may take a couple of attempts to have it line up properly, but when it does, it is just absolutely explosive. That just about does it for today then, everyone. A full guide to the massively improved Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike build build from the base game, and this thing is just an absolute menace. It always was, it always used to be, but now it is quite possibly the most improved build in the game as well, as far as ways to stack more damage on top of what it already could achieve, and considering it was already as strong as it was, that's a ridiculous thing to even be able to say. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and even if you don't plan to use it for yourself, just seeing the absolute destruction that this can bring to the DLC. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.